Hello, NFT Nation. This is Creatoris Rex. And you know us every week. We come back with the TWINN this week in NFT news. And I have my co-host, Scott Leach. How you doing, Scott?
Doing great. Thanks.
So we have so much good news this week, or well, what's good news? We have so much interesting news this week. It's been really busy. People trying to cram things in before the holidays, I think.
Yes. Yeah, I'm getting that too.
Yeah, very good. Okay, to give people a little bit of background here. This is what we're going to talk about today. First, brands in NFT lands. This is a recurring segment that we do every week. This week, it's going to be our first segment because there's a couple of really big news items in there. We're going to talk about marketplaces, VeVe, Solana, something that Coinbase is working on in advance of their launch. We're going to talk about art. We're going to talk about a big artist, really famous, and we're going to talk about an up-and-coming artist that we recently were introduced to that we kind of like. We're going to hit some projects as we normally do. Bored Ape, Proof. Maybe we'll talk a little VeeFriends. I think Scott sometimes has updates there. And we'll just have one additional item at the end, which is going to make Scott not feel so bad from something we talked about a couple weeks ago. Okay. Segment 1. Brands in NFT land. Nike acquires RTFKT. What do you think, Scott?
This is so hard for me because I don't know what my deal is, if it's just my own bias, but I get really, when you're part of something early on and then like the big brands come in, it feels like it's getting something bad's about to happen, or it's getting tainted or taken away from you in some way. But I think it's good. I think it's good for the whole space when brands move in. That's what makes the tech seem viable. They're other competitors are going to move in. People are going to start looking at the space more closely. So overall, I think it's good. I don't know. I'm just a snob or something.
So we can go. There's a number of things going on with RTFKT. So let's delve into this. So first of all, for the people who are watching, I had an extensive write-up in Niftorious.com. So if you just go to Niftorious.com and just look at NFT news, you'll see it's like 3 or 4 back in terms of articles, or just search for RTFKT. So first of all, I think it is really good for the industry because what we're seeing is brands are coming in. And once one brand makes an acquisition like this, the other ones have to pay attention. And that might mean they're going to bring it in-house and create more capability with that, which is going to lead to agencies or other independent contractors, independent artists helping them with this. Others are going to go ahead and they're going to be looking for a project acquisition as well, which should increase or is a potential exit for some of the projects. There's good and bad associated with that, but also it should increase the floor price of some of the other projects that are out there that are doing potentially similar things. So that's one thing that I look at. Mm-hmm. And congratulations to them. That team, I think really understands internet culture. You clearly, the 3 founders have, at least 2 of the 3 have been in, the fashion, culture, gaming, tech space for a long time. And they've done some really interesting things, including they raised $8 million from a whole host of folks, including Andreessen Horowitz, Vayner NFT Fund, or maybe it's I think it's Vayner NFT. Yep. And then a few others that are sort of really prominent. And Scott Belsky was there from Behance. Fuocious was part of it. So in Fuocious, a lot of people know or will recall did a sneaker drop with RTFKT earlier in the year. I think it was in March or something like that.
Yeah.
So these folks are.
Yeah, I think
these folks are really interesting in terms of passion. And so I think it just goes to show if you create a really interesting brand or a trend, there's a really big upside for you, even aside from just selling NFTs.
Yeah, your write-up was great. If anyone's watching this, the write-up you did was really thorough and good. I think you're right. That the Nike, this news in particular is good, I think, because the people behind it are doing it in a thoughtful way, and there's real players involved, right? So I think it's a good thing. The part that I get kind of like, I get so excited from like a creative perspective when this new technology comes out and how it's going to empower creative people to do really amazing things. And then when they get the momentum going and then a brand comes in, there's something about that, some part of me that gets a little bit like hackles go up or whatever.
It
But
should.
I think that's just a reaction I have. It's not necessarily an inappropriate response. I think that
I have a corollary here.
Yeah.
So people might remember this would have been, let's see, now 7 years ago, when Apple bought Beats. Beats was going to come out as a new streaming service. Had very prominent people from the music industry, very prominent in culture. They had obviously the headphones, but they were introducing a streaming service as well. And then Apple bought them, and we never really saw the streaming service that became folded into what is now Apple Music. And the headphones sort of, meandered along. I mean, clearly they're popular now, but they're not really more popular because Apple owns them. I really felt that what we saw was Apple just folding it into its business model and no real innovation there once we did that. And that looked like one of the streaming players that could make it and actually bring some innovation.
Yeah. I think that's absolutely true. I think that's a great example. I do think that Nike's going to innovate, and I do think with these people, they're going to innovate and try a lot of creative things. And so for that, I'm excited. And I do know that we have to bring, it's the catch-22. The big brands are what's going to help make this more mainstream and bring more people on. I just liked this year. It's been awesome for artists and for small groups of people that are able to kick off lots of interesting projects. And there's been some absolutely, there's been some cash grab projects, and there's been rug pull projects, and there's been a lot of bad stuff along the way, but it's really cool to see people get empowered this way. I've never seen it, even in the internet, the mid 90s, this wasn't happening.
Yeah, it wasn't like
on the individual level, the way it's happening now.
Yeah.
I don't think that that's going to change necessarily because big brands are coming in. I think it's just a reaction I have based on my own personal bias. But in the case of Nike, I think they're thinking about it in a thoughtful way. I just don't know, something like the idea of dropping 10 grand for a pair of Jordans in a metaverse, like, I don't know if that works for me. Someone it might, but I mean, that's
already
awesome.
They were selling fashion in Decentraland already. I
think something about the brand. Like, I would rather find if I was into fashion, let's say, and I was watching some runway show with like a wild designer that's up and coming, and they worked with an artist to create that stuff, and I could buy their stuff directly and not go through a brand, like that to me feels more of an authentic relationship, where like something about buying virtual Nikes just feels like I'm getting, I don't know. This is my own bias though. So,
okay. So here's my sense here. I don't know if there's a lot of upside, but the potential upside here is around the shoes, the fashion, the apparel. Given Nike's business model, bringing RTFKT in-house to be able to really pump up their capabilities around dropping fashion, apparel, shoes, being one of those, but just one of them, and bringing in 3 people who really understand the culture, are part of the new culture of Web3, is a really big move. And I think it's what Apple was trying to capture when they acquired Beats. They were really trying to acquire a piece of culture that they could then drive into some of their other business around this space. It was largely a defensive move against what they saw was happening with Spotify. So I think that that's potential upside. And I really believe that Nike and RTFKT could execute on that part of it really well. Here's the bigger risk: CloneX. CloneX are avatars, 3D avatars. They're pretty cool. They are designed, or the promise is that they're going to be able to be used across metaverse spaces. Now, with Nike's backing, maybe it's a little easier for them to do that, but I already thought that they were well positioned enough to get all the metaverse spaces to enable them to do that. But it's hard for me to believe that Nike is going to be a great steward of that. And maybe they'll be better. Maybe they'll bring resources in so RTFKT can do more around the story and build up all the utility around that. But I'm skeptical that Nike can carry out something like that, which is more of a storytelling mechanism, which I would think of from like a brand like well, we'll say Disney is a placeholder for that, but it's not a big studio of some sort.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic observation. I don't know. The trouble I have with it is just like they're a corporation, and I don't nothing against corporations, but they're motivated by, there's essentially one motivation at the end of the day, right? And if at some point the metaverse, what they're doing, comes at odds with the desire to make money or improve the life of shareholders, then that's unfortunate. But that's just business, right? I mean, I get it. It makes me like, you would never, I don't think Nike's ever going to do a Bored Apes thing where they let you own the rights to something, right? So you're still, but I still think overall, I still think this is good, because if corporations get in here and start doing meaningful stuff, like we said before, it brings more people in, but also it starts to change their behavior too. So they might start to loosen up around, copyright infringement is a fantastic, like every bit of data you look at about content being copied or stolen, whenever something, whether it's music or movies or whatever, there's a correlation between it gets stolen and they start selling more. So like,
Yeah.
and I'm sure someone can
effect.
dig in the data and say that like the reason it's stolen more is because but it just spreads word about it. So the whole, like, companies getting over this, like these cease and desist for using their content, like I think that if they leaned into NFTs and the technology, they could start to loosen up around that. So I don't think a corporation will ever just give their IP away, give the rights to anyone the way Bored Apes is doing. And not even to say that that's the right strategy, but I do think they'll start to adopt some behaviors that are more aligned with decentralization, even though they're corporations. Maybe, hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so, I mean, I guess this sort of brings us, because you mentioned IP, to one of the controversies associated with this. And that is that the IP rights were actually, for Clone X, were actually enumerated after the drop. And they have some restrictions, which are interesting. So there's some people who are speculating that some of this might have had to do with Nike coming on board and trying to clean up some things that were going to be difficult for Nike. However, so if you have there are basically three things that people were worried about. IP rights came after the drop. There was potentially a situation where the 100 or so Clone X were retained by the company were some of the more rare ones. And then the third was potentially insider trading for one of the founders' sister and cousin. So let's just talk through those. And I would say that we haven't really heard both sides of the story here. I think we've only heard the people claiming foul on this. But the first is this IP rights. So for Clone X, you will have rights to commercialize the likeness of the NFT that you own up to $1 million. I don't know how they're going to track that, but okay, fine. After $1 million, I guess you lose all rights. It's not really clear. You have to do profit sharing. That's not clear. But I think it's just like you can make up to 1 million and then too bad, right? Now, it doesn't mean like, could you sell it to somebody else and they can make another million? None of these things are actually enumerated.
Yeah.
But it came after the drop. So it's at this limitation. And 15% of the Clone X were done with the Japanese artist. His name. Let me see. It's Marashi. So 15%. Where are we doing this? We're done with Murakami. It's a famed Japanese artist, and those have no IP rights. So they're the more rare, and some people thought they were going to be the more coveted, but then you can't really do anything with them. So you sort of limit people. They can present them as PFPs, have them in their wallet. So I don't know. I think that's something that can really destroy goodwill in a community very quickly. And I immediately saw people on Twitter and NFT Twitter, some of the people who have been the biggest supporters of this organization, this project up to this point, come up and say, Nike's going to be terrible for this. You can't have Web 2 come in and try to take this over. And then people were piling on and saying, hey, and they just rugged us in IP rights.
Yeah, I totally understand that sentiment. The trick here, so there's two things I think. One that I've observed, and I'm sure you have observed it as well, is all these projects, everything is so early and moving so fast that there is no way to know all the unknowns that you need to know after the project is minted.
Yeah, that's
And
fair.
when you start dealing with just the legality of some of this, there some of those decisions could be based on just trying to lay down a set of rules. Now, I'm not defending what Nike did at all, but I think we just don't know the full story of why those things were done. That is totally troubling. Like that sounds to me like, oh, so now that I've made this into $1 million piece of IP, you're going to take the rights to me when it really has a lot of value associated with it. It's like they're using the
It is interesting
crowd
because
to,
they're like, it happened before the announcement. But then they were talking about, it's been sort of an open rumor in the RTFKT Discord for like a week, and there was some insider trading, or people are claiming insider trading before that. And they're like, hey, it was an open secret that we were having this conversation. But it almost seems that they just did the CloneX drop. And it almost
yeah.
seems like they might have had a tacit agreement, an LOI, something, but they weren't going to execute it till after the drop was complete because they didn't want to impact the drop. It's just like, it's really kind of an interesting thing. I would say that the fact that the sister of one of the founders sold, I think, 9 Clone X's at 9 ETH each, like the day before the announcement, or within a couple days before the announcement. Wasn't great. But like the timing was that the drop had just happened. She just got them in her wallet and she's liquidating
Yeah, but even
immediately.
that, I mean, and people don't necessarily know what they don't know. Like honestly, her perspective could have been that she ought to sell these before the announcement, so it doesn't look like she's waited for the announcement for
That's
that.
true.
Like you could twist that story any way you want. Again, not defending or condemning that behavior. Just there's always more to the story, and I think one of the big struggles we're having right now in this space in general is you went from this, corporations who keep quiet and have a clear marketing message and narrative to transparency. And when you blend the two, it creates absolute potential for disaster because you see just enough it's like the Hitchcock Rear Window movie, except there is
Right.
no murder. There might not even be a murderer happening. You know what I mean? It's just people jumping to conclusions, and they might be right and they might not. It's
It's
hard.
exactly right. And we're just bringing up both sides of this. I would say that we don't have enough information for any of these accusations, but
Yeah.
since they were so fast and furious after this announcement, and a couple of them
Yeah.
were even surfacing before the announcement, it's just worthwhile for us to tell.
Yeah.
Overall, I would just, my closing thought on this is the RTFKT acquisition by Nike is actually really good for the industry. It's going to bring more attention. It's, we saw Adidas buy a Bored Ape, take some other steps just recently about getting involved in the space. Nike comes and makes a bigger move, just buying a whole project. The apparel and the fashion element, I think, could just explode and be just the perfect type
Mhm.
of partnership for a company like Nike. I'm a little concerned about the Clone X and what that does for metaverse
Yeah.
perspectives. But my final point will be, when somebody at the top, like RTFKT, and sort of, and I think they were at the top of this idea of NFT fashion and culture, when they get acquired by a big corporation, that just opens up a slot for someone else who's an independent to take the top spot. And so somebody else now really should be looking at this as a huge opportunity to be the
Yeah.
independent in the space.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think overall it's good. And I even think these conversations about all this stuff is good in order for this space to mature and for all of us to understand like what's appropriate behavior or not. We have to have these conversations about what should be disclosed and what shouldn't, and what does transparency really look like. So yeah, I think it's all good stuff because it's helping us move in a direction. And if someone does something we don't like, that's great because we know now the community can decide if they don't like it and can
Yep.
make a choice how they want to move forward. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we talk about this idea of learning along the way, doing something maybe folks don't like. Well, let's talk about Pepsi and the mic drop. So the mic drop, in some ways has been successful. I think it's it was trending about 1.8 ETH yesterday. I think it's like 0.8 ETH today. The mic drop, just to give people background, and there's a significant write-up or an extensive write-up on Niftorious.com on Pepsi Mic Drop as well. We call it Gamed and Confused because it was a little awkward. So what it is it is 1,800 or plus microphones with a lot of Pepsi logos on them and with different accessories like sunglasses, hair, these types of things, not related to anything specifically other than saying, Pepsi is big in the music industry. We've supported pop music for years, and they've supported that through bankrolling some people who were already popular. It's not, I don't know if they were really supporting the industry other than they were just trying to pay big names to be associated with their business. But okay, fine. They made this grab. But the interesting thing was they had a limited number of these NFTs. They're obviously a big brand. This is their first foray into the NFT space. So they wanted to do a wait list. And we've seen wait lists in the past. I think Mechaverse, but they're not the only ones. We've talked about them on this show before. So they had a wait list. You go, and at 12 noon on, I think it was Friday, just last week, 12 noon Eastern, you could go on and you could connect your wallet and reserve. Now, obviously, it was going to be a really quick thing. It was free. It was going to be free to register and actually free to mint. But you had to move really quickly. And they didn't have a button on there. There was no button. And there was no contract. So you couldn't like go to the contract and mint directly because they weren't minting. It was just a wait list. Okay. So what happened was some enterprising collectors figured out where the API was. And they just started registering at about 7 minutes before the hour when the API went live in advance of the website refreshing. And what that did is it actually created kind of like a denial of service attack on the API. So first of all, there were many thousands of people who registered before noon, you could do it in the official way. And then anybody who was coming on right at noon, 12:01 through about 12:15 could not actually complete the transaction. Because there were so many hits on the API, it wasn't ready for that because of all these bots that were going after it. So anybody there, they were basically getting these failures, but it wasn't clear that there was a failure, right? You didn't know. What Pepsi did afterwards is they looked at it and they saw what was going on. And they basically said anybody who tried to register before noon is going to be disqualified. So it's sort of an easy way to do it. But those API hits were still happening after noon. There were about 38,000 people or 33,000 people, I think, or 33,000 wallets is a better way to say it, that registered before they shut it down. It was maybe 12:20, 12:25. So it was open for about 20 minutes as they're trying to figure out what was going on. And I know some people that finally got in because he was able to scrape all the data from the APIs and see what was in there. And he was able to see that he was registered as like 19,000 or something like that in there. And he did not make it. So there were people before him, but it was really interesting the way they tried to work through it. And then ultimately people could mint yesterday for free. And then immediately people listed it on OpenSea for sale.
Yeah. Yeah. We talked about it last week, I think, or at least we've talked about it a few times. Like I've yet to see any drop of any sort that goes really smoothly. In this case, it's difficult to tell if this was an instance of just par for the course or if Pepsi's lack of experience in the space in general or naivete or something created it. Who knows? But
okay, Pepsi's lack of experience, but who is helping them with this?
Vayner. Yeah, so and that's what makes me think that it's probably just another example of like figuring out how to get this right.
Well, I can see we shouldn't speculate, but we will anyway. I can see like a strategy team, coming in and saying, hey, what are you going to do? Like we just did Budweiser and they did cans throughout the ages. And they're like, 1893 is when we first introduced Pepsi. Let's do something. And they're like, let's do something different, right? We want to be unique. Oh, we're really into music and, drop. We're going to drop an NFT, mic drop. That would be really cool. We'll do microphones. And it just seems like a great idea and concept. I'm not sure it really resonates. with anybody. I'd say that it is Pepsi. They're a big global brand. Their first NFT drop, maybe it has value just for that reason. I'm not sure there's anything else about it, either aesthetically makes sense, or from an authenticity standpoint around the brand that makes sense to drive value. They could add utility to it later, but they're not promising anything.
Yeah. This is an example of like where we talked about Nike and their team and their approach. That feels like they're trying to take an authentic approach to this and adding utility, where the Pepsi and the Budweiser one, I know we're just talking about Pepsi now, but both those feel a little bit like, oh, okay, just hopping on the thing. I do know that some of those brands do have hardcore loyal fans. And if you're selling around a couple thousand NFTs, like you probably have, I'm sure there are a couple thousand hardcore Budweiser fans and a couple thousand hardcore Pepsi fans that want those because they're collectors. So I think it was smart that they did smaller runs. And maybe that's enough for people. And
they could have done 10,000 if they wanted, but it's just a trial run, right? They're going to do something else.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, I know Vayner's behind all these, right? Which is also a whole nother conversation. I think
it is
brilliant, but outside, I think his strategy is well, we'll talk about that, but, I know that he's big on saying like, look, you can't fake it. So I'm sure he and his team are messaging that to them. Like, you can't just make the NFT and then split. You have to continue to support this thing into the future. Now, whether they choose to do that is a whole nother story, but, who knows if Pepsi did this and then started doing, I have a buddy who's obsessed with Crystal Pepsi, that stupid clear version of Pepsi they released in the 90s.
Right.
They stopped making it. If like he found out that you held one of these NFTs, you could get a 2 liter of Crystal Pepsi, like, or if people that hold the whatever McDonald's one, if they get a McRib whenever they want, whenever they go to McDonald's, they can order a McRib, even though it's not time for the McRib sandwich. Like, there's ways to give serious delight to these holders that could create a lot of equity for those brands. I think as to whether they do that, who knows?
Well, I think like from a utility standpoint, it would be great. So if they really want to be authentic about tying themselves to the music industry, the next star they do a deal with, mint a song, or have a song that's actually mint it. Yeah. So it's an NFT, and distribute it for free for everybody who owns one of those NFTs.
There you go.
So that turns it in from this clever idea that the marketing team created just to get some PR, right? That could just be forgotten, like almost every campaign has ever been run, because everyone wants to do the new stuff. They don't want to dwell on the things in the past. If they create this as like a long-term relationship, that could really make sense, and they could augment it with other, what I would consider to be more authentic Pepsi storylines. But I think we just have to wait to see where it goes.
Another thing, like if they're into music, like show it. Stop pumping big artists. Like, I don't need another Michael Jackson commercial.
Exactly.
Show me, like, go give some of that, like, celebrate up and coming artists that are in the NFT space doing interesting things. Cause now you can use your brand equity to bring up someone else and get attention to them and do that. I think earlier we were talking about the IP rights, right? So we're going through these trends of Bored Apes gives IP rights. Other NFTs are doing that. You hear people like Gary Vee saying he's not a fan of that because he thinks you ought to control the story of the IP. I think where we're going to land, and I think the biggest potential for all this stuff is collaboration and the ability for everyone to benefit financially and from a brand equity perspective, or from a awareness if you're an artist, because support artists work deal with brand, let everyone get in on that action, and it's all spelled out in the contract so you can see what everyone's getting, and you can choose whether it's fair or not. I don't know. I think there's something there that's more like Nike, let up and coming designers design some shoes and then promote those in the metaverse so that you're bringing them up. You're benefiting, the consumer is benefiting, or the fan or the collector of that artist, whatever the case may be. Anyhow, I'll get on
Yeah,
bucks now.
I agree 100%. And I think around the IP ownership, we have this right behind us. That's the Niftorium. That's an example of what the Niftorian PFPs will look like going forward, created by Matthew Curry. He's a great illustrator. There's a lot of really interesting elements to that, which I think people are going to like. But we've basically said we're going to do a Bored Ape license because we're a community of artists and some collectors as well, but it's mostly artists right now. And we want them to be able to do something with it if they want, if they really like this iconography. And we just did something. We did a contest a week ago, and it was really just we gave them the raw outline of this owl and just say do whatever you want with it. And we got so many amazing things back. I just love that. We like this idea that people can just use it as a creative palette. That doesn't mean that we won't have rights to the Niftorian name, or there won't be, we have a separate logo, but there will be a new logo, which will be one of the PFPs, maybe a group of them or something like that. And those will be, we'll own those and we'll retain those rights, and those will be the core. But we want other people innovating around it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Okay. Should we move on?
Sure.
Brands in NFT land. We just spent a half hour talking about that.
I know.
But these are the best stories we've had so far, and partly because they're so complex. There's like good parts and there's bad parts. And these are all things that we're learning about. All right, marketplaces. We've got a few that I think are interesting here. VeVe mints on Immutable X. So what this means. So VeVe is an app. They're a Singapore-based company that supports VeVe, and they have rights with a lot of big IP, particularly from from comics and Hollywood and things like that. And so they've been minting things right along, some Disney characters, things like that, Star Wars. And so that's been really popular, but it's just been in the app. It's like, it's at best a side chain, right? But not even really that. It's just basically a separate app. Now they just started to migrate all of those into Immutable X. So these are Ethereum based NFTs now. So I guess I have a couple questions for you. What do you think of that? And is this something that every marketplace is going to have to do that's on the side chain or in a separate app? Are they going to have to, for longevity, put this on some blockchain somewhere?
I think so. I think for credibility's sake, but I also think the caveat to that is that I think that it's going to get really smooth from a user experience perspective, whereas a user, you won't have to go and bridge out your NFT for, whatever gas is at that moment or something. I know it's another topic we're going to talk about at some point, but the Coinbase wallet they're talking about doing, where Coinbase has done a fantastic job of making crypto accessible to everyone, and it's custodial wallet. And I know there's strong opinions about that, but anyone can go in and buy just about any coin in Coinbase, and their experience as a user is, they don't know that necessarily that each one of those is a separate wallet or what that entails. The experience is seamless, and I can go in and buy Solana or Bitcoin or ETH. And I think their NFT marketplace is going to be the same. So my guess is it's going to evolve to the point where you can buy an NFT off any, whether it's a Solana NFT or an ETH NFT, but your end experience as a user will be that it's a single collection of stuff. You can filter it and look at it in different ways, but I think we're heading towards that. Now, whether they include side chains or whether side chains have to make this bridge out option, I think it's inevitable. An NFT has to be an NFT, has to be an NFT, no matter where it's. Otherwise, it's going to get really confusing for everyone as to what's real and what isn't.
I mean, one of the things that's really helped the crypto market in general is that we have all these exchanges that allow you to create these pairs between existing coins.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been, I think has been really important. If we just had complete silos, there was no interoperability between them, it really would have reduced innovation. And that would have in some ways made it harder for new coins to come up. And as we all know, and Ethereum's got lots of those. There's some that are not on Ethereum as well, but ERC20s are the most profligate. But I think we also would have seen less innovation across all the other chains as well. And I think the fact that we had this interoperability put a little pressure on all the chains to be a little bit more innovative. And so
it's a great point. Yeah.
yeah, so I think that this idea of interoperability with NFTs is going to be really important. Now, at the very least, I think listing on one of the public chains is really important. You know, Coinbase talking about actually creating some fluidity across chains is interesting. Although, when you're on, if you mint on one chain and you can make it visible on another chain, but if you mint on another chain, you've got two items, which I think will probably be more common as we go forward. You know, we're going to have multiple items for things. And in fact, we just did that with Neftorian because we made 28 of our Mint Pass or the Founders Collection NFTs available on Rally, which is a side chain, which are not available on any of the public chains. But we basically just said to everyone who purchased it, we're going to send you an Ethereum version. You don't have to burn your Rally version. You can keep that too. But the Ethereum version is the one that's tied into the project because there's so many other things that we're doing with connectivity externally. We can't, a lot of the features we want, we can't do on Rally right now. And I know Rally long-term has been saying that they're going to create some sort of connectivity or be able to bridge out to one of the main chains, which is great. We want to do that. But I think we're just going to start seeing this. You really have to have something on one of the public chains, even though VeVe's been hugely successful so far. And they've got it through content and ease of use. Civilians come in, they buy with fiat, really simple. It's a good model. But even for them, they acknowledged in the announcement around this that some people did not consider it a real NFT because it was not on a public immutable ledger, that they didn't have access to the biggest investors and the largest group of investors who are on the Ethereum blockchain. And so they felt it was good for their users, but I think what they were really indicating is they thought it was necessary.
Yeah, I think this is, I mean, we've talked about it in previous episodes. It's the wall, like what are the pros and cons of a walled garden? I think it will go towards what you're proposing, that these side chains to be taken, if they want to play in that space, they need to have a mechanism to get into mainnet. That said, as you know, and I know, there's benefits to the side chain where you could, pre-mint. What you're doing with Neftorian is pretty clever, and Rally's not quite there to do some of the things you wanted to do, but I could see a lot of folks using side chains as the pre-minting space and then bringing it to mainnet, or letting their users bridge out, and you kind of get almost like a double drop scenario where you can drop it on a side chain to one audience and then drop it to a larger audience on mainnet. The thing I do wonder about is as the technology becomes more, to a degree, I think there's going to be ubiquitous baseline stuff that all of them do. Ethereum is going to get faster. And then it's going to be like, okay, what's the difference between these layer ones? And at that point, what I wonder is, will an average consumer even care or know? Or will it be like, terrible analogy, but that's just like my internet provider, right? I don't actually look at them. It doesn't affect my experience unless something's fundamentally broken.
Well, I think that VeVe's model, now that they're exporting, they're just in case people don't know, they're doing it on Immutable X, which is a layer 2 on Ethereum, which then creates a situation where they can have basically zero cost minting. I'm not sure exactly how they then, well, once you do that, you can see it in OpenSea and other marketplaces on Ethereum.
I wonder if someone's going to come out with like a burning thing where you, like it's Coinbase or someone else, where it will do all the bridging for you. You put the NFT in, it burns it and creates a new instance of it on whatever other blockchain.
You would think that would be good. I think for VeVe, basically what you would be looking at now that they've done this export essentially to Immutable X and Ethereum, is that inside your VeVe app, it's like a viewer. And I don't really know how it's going to work in terms of exchanging. So if you sell it within the VeVe app, how does that get recorded on the blockchain? I assume that's why they're doing Immutable X, because then they can just do a zero cost update to that in terms of who the owner is. Mm-hmm. But will they know the other person's Ethereum wallet address? I don't know how that's going to work, but I think it's interesting that they feel compelled to do that. It just seems about right. It's like this is the this is what we saw on the internet. This is why Web 1 and Web 3 are so much similar, right? So like VeVe was kind of like AOL, right? You know, just for NFTs, it was like this nice little siloed walled garden. And now they're realizing that and maybe they realized this from the beginning. I shouldn't say now they're realizing it, but it's a big world out there. And to be a player in the big wide world, the brands are going to be at a disadvantage if they can only send people to the walled garden.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's a perfect analogy. The AOL, I mean, no one knew how to use the internet when it,
it was, and there wasn't, I mean, it really wasn't like, it wasn't very robust. And so they were able to, through their walled garden, they actually made a nice internet-like experience.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you think about the internet and trying to explain that to someone when it didn't exist, of like, okay, you connect this modem, and we talked about it before, all the crazy steps you have to do. Like,
doesn't it sound a lot like NFT or crypto wallets?
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's the stuff we get hung up on. I keep hearing this conversation about like, it's so Web3 is so hard. It's hard to figure out the MetaMask thing. It's hard to figure that stuff's going to get really, really, really easy. And then once people realize the benefits of, when you have a MetaMask plugin and you can connect to any site in Web3, you start to see the benefits of this and how easy it is to transact. I mean,
well, I wonder if there's a time when my parents will know what a nonce is. Probably not. I think it's a generational technology. It's going to pass them by.
Yeah.
And they shouldn't worry about it as far as I'm concerned. Okay. We had another marketplace announcement. Justin Kahn, known for Justin TV, better known as Twitch, just launched a NFT marketplace on Solana specifically for NFT gaming. And I think the key headline here from my perspective is, first of all, someone who's really well known, has some star power in the tech world, has some cultural cachet as well, is committed to NFTs, has committed to Solana, and it's a perfect example of what's working right now. The big players are kind of out there, the generalists. If you want to get attention and growth right now, probably a good idea to do some sort of niche strategy, and his is gaming.
Yeah, and I don't think this is still I don't think it's niche at all yet. It seems niche now, but this is like such the obvious use case for NFTs. And you've got this crazy polarization happening, right? This tribalism of like NFT enthusiasts or crypto enthusiasts and hardcore gamers, and like, I don't want that in my. And meanwhile, the giant AAA, those are the guys that are. Well, I'm not going to go on that rant, but there's a huge opportunity here for game developers and gamers. And like, if you think that it's bad, like, do some research, man. This is going to be gigantic and amazing, and not just from an ownership perspective and an ability for game players to earn assets, utility, and money from this stuff. It's going to create entirely new games and experiences. Like, we are going to see. Imagine taking a weapon from one game into another game, or taking a story from one game or a character and then using that character to play in another game, or destroying something that fundamentally changes an entire game. Like it is so exciting to me. I'm shocked no one's done it yet. And Solana makes sense because it's fast, and I still think it's early because all my gaming experiences, they need a killer tie. Someone needs to do something amazing with this to show the potential of it.
And that's the thing. I thought that might be the most interesting thing. So Solana's had a wonderful year. Obviously, the value of Solcoin is up over 100x since January. So they've had some other benefits there. They've started doing NFTs just a few months ago. So there's been some movement there, although I think there's generally in the NFT community, there's some complaint about quality there. So they've got to work on it. But gaming, what a great thing. And you've got Justin Kahn, so famous, particularly in the gaming industry because of what Justin TV and then Twitch became. I really feel like this could be a big boost for them. We're sort of at a point right now where layer 2s on Ethereum, like Polygon and Immutable X, could really sweep up all of the NFT-based play-to-earn gaming, just because of their tie to Ethereum and why it's the most obviously used for these types of applications today. And then Solana being, one of the other layer ones, which is really competing to be a big player here. And so it just seems to me it's a great injection for them right now, a great vote of confidence that you could easily see slipping away.
Yeah. I'll be curious to see what happens. I think, my experience so far using Solana, just dabbling and researching, is that it is way more user friendly right now than ETH, or it's fast, it's cheap. You can make mistakes without, in terms of transactions, not in terms of putting money into shit coins or something like that. But
Right.
it makes this whole strategy makes sense to me. I do still think it's going to boil down to someone needs to create something meaningful that makes it click for people. And I think it's the problem with what makes VR a challenge for lots of folks and any new platform is you need content that makes it relevant. Yeah. And gaming, I think, is especially hard for that.
Yeah.
If Halo hadn't come out with the original Xbox, if that hadn't been available, I don't think there'd be an Xbox right now. That game sold that system.
Yeah.
Because it was a great game.
And it still does in some ways.
Exactly. Yeah.
So popular.
So,
okay. So let's talk about another marketplace as we close out the marketplace discussion. And that's Coinbase NFT marketplace, which is said to be launching before the end of the year. That's what they've said. And they haven't updated that. They're doing their promotion every week on Twitter Spaces, and occasionally they're showing like some sneak peeks. It seems like it might be imminent because we just saw the Coinbase wallet update on the mobile app, and more particularly in the Chrome plugin. So the browser plugin being very, very important. And the browser plugin in this case, very important that you can actually see your NFTs in it, which you couldn't in the past. You could on the mobile. It's kind of clunky compared to MetaMask. So I have two questions for you. So first of all, sort of what do you make of this in terms of what the impact is for Coinbase? And the second, maybe more important question, is it at what point will we see Coinbase wallets exceed MetaMask wallets?
I think really soon. I think, yeah.
Because there's more people not in the market than there are in the market. And Coinbase has many, many times, probably something like 100 times more Coinbase users than there are MetaMask users. They'd only need like 2% of their user base to come in, and should blow MetaMask away. And it's just like it'll seem like the easy on ramp to say, "Oh yeah, I've got Coinbase wallet." It is easy to work between the two. I'd say that there's some fees in there, which I think are not ideal, but it would strike me that not only is this the step they needed with the browser to set up for the Coinbase marketplace, because they want people to be able to have an end-to-end experience in the Coinbase ecosystem, but also to the extent that becomes more user-friendly, and it is getting more user-friendly. I would think that MetaMask is going to be sort of the OG wallet, and everyone else, the civvies, are going to all have Coinbase.
I think that's what's going to happen. And it's not, I'm not, just to be clear, in case I get flack for this, I'm not saying it's what I want to happen or that there's anything wrong with MetaMask, but I think you nailed it. Like, there's a lot of people that use MetaMask that still use Coinbase to bridge money into MetaMask because it's,
of course.
So you're already going to Coinbase, and if they make it easy, and now you save an extra step of sending money and paying that fee,
or just having everything in one place.
Exactly. And Coinbase is like, look, they're fantastic at this is complex stuff, and UI and UX is huge, and they're doing a really good job of making it easy for folks to get in. All of us that have been using MetaMask and are used to that, we know what it is and how it works, and we know where the weirdness is, but most people don't.
Yeah. Well, so I think a lot of the OGs are going to complain about it. Although I will say that every week I just got another email from Coinbase because I've signed up for early access to their NFT marketplace, like 2.5 million other people. They are still adding blue chip and high profile NFT projects to this. They're saying, so I think I think for the most part, people are saying, hey, they want to be part of it. They see the opportunity to really expand the market. However, obviously we're going to have some of the split with the OGs who are more traditional crypto types, who have not been a big fan of Coinbase because of the custodial wallet aspect, might push back against it. But I would say that, Wallet by Coinbase, I've been using it for 6 months or so. I think it's a pretty good solution. It's not as good as MetaMask, but seems like there's going to be huge investment there by Coinbase. They can just copy those features, I would think, fairly quickly.
Yeah, I mean, this is like what happens, right? Someone does all the hard work, and then a larger corporation comes in and iterates on. Apple's fantastic at this. Like, they waited till everyone made a lot of shitty MP3 players before they dropped the iPod, and then they made it easy as hell. And people started paying for music on top of it. Yeah, I think you're right. I think there'll always be a place for MetaMask and for hardcore users, and they might start to even slant their product more towards that audience. But I think Coinbase is going to make it super easy. And look, all the NFT people selling NFTs, like, if you, regardless of how hardcore they are, I don't care. If you tell someone like, hey, we're opening a giant new marketplace, do you want to be a part of it? Like, come on.
Well, plus, I mean, just being, they might, I don't know if they're doing incentives or not, but being able to attach your brand to Coinbase just gives you more publicity because they're tweeting it. They're obviously high profile. They reach into all these people that are already in NFTs. There's people that are not in NFTs, and they're saying, "Oh, that project associated with them. Oh, that's a mark of confidence by Coinbase in this project. That's pretty interesting." I've noticed there were a few smaller projects have also been brought in. Must have connections. Good for them. But I think that's going to be really important. And Coinbase Wallet, I guess I'll be interested to see when they get a Ledger integration, because it seems like that would be a logical thing for Ledger to go after a larger market there as well. It also seems like most of the people coming in, the newbies coming in, will be really intimidated by using a cold storage wallet. And it might not be really in Coinbase's interest to really push people into cold storage, because they're really focused on hot storage.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to art. We're getting to this too late. I think I might have to move the art thing just up closer to the beginning. Come, everybody who made it this far, we're going to do art sooner. So we just have two stories today. One is we have another Banksy deal. So the gorilla and the pink mask, it's going to be fractionalized as an NFT. There's a company that's been purchasing a lot of this art, particularly street art, and then they're fractionalizing it. We just saw this at Art Basel. We talked about it last week with a Banksy piece. And once again, they're going to sell basically pixels of the NFT so that people will be able to own something specific. It sounded like it's going to be randomly allocated based on what I've seen. But again, we come back to this idea of, it's not just I own 10% or 1% or 0.5%, whatever it is, of this thing, of the whole thing. I own a pixel, which represents 0.05% of the whole thing. It strikes me as a pretty cool idea. I like it.
It's clever and novel, and I think it gets people. All this stuff makes me think of, do you remember, I don't know if you remember this, it was early 2000, maybe 2005-ish, that there was a guy did the $1 million website.
Oh, yeah.
It was like this reminds me of that.
There's someone who's doing that for the NFT space too, which is pretty.
Yeah, it's just like such a novel thing that could capture people's imagination. I think once we start to see utility around this stuff, people will forget all about owning, displaying the pixel, because people are going to find, new things. But I think it's a great way to get people excited and in the door. And it also allows us human beings to wrap our heads around something that's really abstract. Like,
yes.
Oh, I own a fraction of a physical thing, but in a digital, like, what the hell is this bullshit? But now, like, even though it's just a pixel, like, oh, that's the thing I own. I think it creates a kind of, a metaphor for us to grab.
Well, so we were in the Notorious Discord, we were talking about the other Banksy piece. And so I'll just bring it up here again. So if anyone wants to join the Discord, by the way, it's, if you just go to bit.ly/ Niftorian. It's capital N, Niftorian dash capital N, capital F, capital T. So Niftorian dash NFT. You're welcome to join in there and some of these conversations. We were talking about this idea of owning. Like last week, I said, hey, I thought it would be really cool because it'd be like land. You try to buy adjacent parcels of land. If you wanted a certain piece, you could just go and buy the different pixels that you could own actually. You might own like 3%, but you own a specific object in that picture. That would be really cool.
Yeah.
And then I started thinking about this. Well, so what does that mean then? Could somebody just reassemble the whole thing and own it all, right? By buying all of them?
Mm-hmm.
Probably not. Because what's going to happen is some of those wallets are going to turn out to be dead wallets. So what happens if there's 10% of the pixels are missing? You can never put them back together again. Does this look like reclaimed art that people find and there's it's damaged because it's been through fire or something else over time? And what does that do? Does that make it more valuable, less valuable? And then does the lost wallet suddenly come up and then they've got the last 2 pixels that somebody wants? It could be really amazing how that plays out.
Oh, it could. Yeah. And people could intentionally do I keep some Nicolas Cage National Treasure movie where you're hunting for the seed phrase for some missing. Yeah, there's a lot of neat things around there that I think will happen. Whether it's in the future, if this type of thing keeps going on, will there be a smart contract in place that says if someone owns a certain percentage, they can it can be like a takeover or something, and it forces that person to sell at market value or better. So it doesn't screw them necessarily, but you
create it like a DAO with some sort of constitution.
Yeah, because I think a lot of these are going to become DAOs where we all own this Banksy. We want to sell it together, or do we want to?
That's right, because then you could have some holdouts or no, I'm not going to do this, but you have to pay.
Or if you want to sell your share, first right of refusal goes to the DAO itself, and then they can choose. Or if you want to sell it without the DAO, maybe the DAO takes 5%. You know what I mean? So the DAO could still benefit from someone selling their share. I think there's a lot of interesting things there.
That's a clever idea. I like that. Okay, let's take a moment to this is gonna be a new segment that Scott and I have been talking about. Let's just highlight an artist that we like, that we've seen interesting work with. I found this. This is you can follow the artist here, SarahScript.eth. It's SarahScript on Twitter. It'd be a good way to get there. See this on, I think this one was on, I want to say Foundation, but you can see it on OpenSea as well. And so this is the night before Cryptmas. So you'll see the night before Cryptmas is the little book, and there's a bunch of Easter eggs in here. I just like the style. This is a style of art that I like. Probably just a little nostalgia from my youth. And there's a bunch of little things in here. If people immediately recognize a cool cat in there, there's a world of women. But there's some of the favorite things of the artist related to the NFT space. She has a number of other pieces like this with little Easter eggs around NFT and NFT culture, particularly NFT Twitter culture. But I just wanted to highlight this because I thought it was a really cool one.
Yeah, this is great. I same as you. There's the aesthetic, the style is nostalgic. And I love I'm just looking at all the Easter eggs in here too. It's cool. Great. I dig it.
All right. So that's SarahScript.eth, SarahScript on Twitter. So you should go check out her work. We like it. We don't own any of it. We're not pumping our bag. But this is just a segment that we're going to add in, just like art we like. And, and maybe some people discover Sarah through this, and that'll help her career. But either way, we just want to give you a sense of what we're looking at these days. Okay, we're coming to the end, but I do want to just hit on a couple things really quickly because we had really big news, Bored Ape Yacht Club and Animoca. So Animoca is well known as a gaming company in the Web3 space, has a couple of significant projects, the biggest of which is the Sandbox. And some people who were paying attention might remember that Bored Ape Yacht Club did a collab with the Sandbox in July. They bought a big tract of land. Then a bunch of apes came in and were buying adjacent parcels. And so that did a little bit of a mini pump for that. But the key thing here is that Animoca is going to create a play to earn game. It looks like it's going to be restricted, at least initially, to ape holders. So that would be probably apes, mutants, and kennel club or dogs in that space. Is this the right move for Bored Ape to go into gaming when the brand has really not been about gaming, although they did do a game a little while ago, and they've got one that they're trying to roll out right now, just for some of the users. What do you think about this long-term play with Animoca about a PDE game?
I think the ape strategy in general of just trying lots of stuff at this stage is really good because they can afford to do it. And if it doesn't work, whatever, they'll move to the next thing. I don't think it damages the brand or anything. The fact that everyone owns the rights, I think it's just a good way to figure out what works. And I'm watching closely because I want someone to do something in the gaming space that has meaning and works and helps people to get it. So I like it. Yeah.
Well, there are some things that are working, like Axie, for example, is a perfect example of something that appears to be working tremendously well. There are some things that seem to work for a short period of time, like the Wolf game. And now I guess there's an equivalent, the Sheep game. What's that on? Avalanche, I think, which is got the 0 transaction fees. But so there are some things that seem to be working, Axie being the best example. I think it's probably important for them because Bored Ape is essentially become the cultural institution of the NFT space. I absolutely believe that they will exceed the punks in terms of market value. I don't know when that'll be, probably in the next 6 months. Just because we see so much innovation coming out of that. The game is one area, and it strikes me that over the last decade in particular, but it's been accelerated in the last 2 years, gaming has been a much more significant driver of culture, just broadly, societal culture, and then internet culture. And so having or not having a position in that probably would be a long-term detriment.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think there's the one thing here that I think is important to point out, and I think why a lot of gamers are barfing all over NFTs is there's so many within games. There are so many separate kind of subcultures that, example, like these are all known things, but PC gamers, hardcore gamers might not, in my experience, a lot of them despise mobile games. And excuse me, console, same thing. So you have these like intense rivalries and different types of games that appeal to different types of gamers. So I think that's going to be where we start to see, Roblox, like kids play that thing like crazy, but you don't run into a whole lot of, even Minecraft at this point, there's a lot of fatigue, I think, around gamers who have gotten a little older because they've moved on to something else. They've had their experience there. I guess what I'm just saying is I think there's lots of space for just because this game works or doesn't mean that Bored Apes couldn't do another totally different game that could work or not work. Yeah.
Well, what we've seen to date is for the gaming space related to NFTs is either an existing title adds NFTs or the more successful ones have been new titles come out, new companies in general, and they basically build a community around their NFTs and the game itself. So they start from scratch. I think this is very interesting, and we'll probably see more of this. We've seen a little bit of it with other projects doing these mini games, which I think will continue to be popular. But those aren't really as ambitious as like you wouldn't bring Animoca on for that, right? So I think this one is going to be, take a really robust community. By the way, it's a much bigger community because you're talking about between the three. I think there's 17,000 people who own either an ape or a mutant, and then if you put some dogs in there, you might add another 1,000 or 2 who don't own one of the others. But it's like 15 to 20,000 people, so it's a little bit larger than the 10,000 community.
Sure.
Only a subset's going to play, but it would be a great way to get a game started and to create some mechanics which are
absolutely
really valuable. It might create an avenue for Yuga Labs, the creators of Bored Ape Yacht Club, to launch another NFT, which is not part of the Bored Ape ecosystem, but allows you to play the Bored Ape game.
Yeah, they could spin off into, yeah, I mean, so much possibility. So yeah, I think learning about it now is really strategic for them. But your point is great. Like there's so many different mechanics that can work for crypto and NFTs in the gaming space, whether it's the NFT get you access to just play the game, whether you're earning gaming objects and assets that are NFTs, whether the stuff you do with your character is an NFT and it's contributing to a ledger that tells the story of that universe you're in and shapes the future of that universe. Like there's so many ways it can go. It's huge.
Did you play the game in, I think it was late August, early September, the Bored Ape game that came out? You didn't play it?
No, I looked and it just looked like kind of a lightweight platformer thing from what I saw, given I didn't spend any time with it. So I don't know for sure, but yeah,
well, it drove, the one thing I will say is it drove community engagement.
Yeah.
There's a lot of talk about it. There's still people still talk about it. So I think it's like low risk for them. I mean, they've got the one that's that they've tried to roll out, but they had an iOS issue recently.
Yeah,
but that'll come out. There'll be this more substantial one, and I really think that it's going to be heavily integrated into the sandbox. And
that's the stuff. I think the portability between different platforms is going to be really cool. The one thing I think that could really, they could stub their toe on is if it's lightweight and fun time waster, I think that doesn't hurt them. But I think if they go the route of one of these, you know, all the gated paywall stuff we saw on mobile, I think that could be bad. So play to earn sounds good, but as to what that means, if it's like a grinding game, I just don't know. Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, and we haven't really talked about that. We were just talking about game. We weren't talking about that they're listing as a P2E game. And it, you know, not surprising. I mean, Axie Infinity sold $3 billion in NFTs for their P2E. That is a new significant revenue source, and someone like Bored Ape, they have to now that the valuation really just at the floor is over $3 billion for what Yuga Labs has put out. They have to continually think of new ways to prop that up, because you know people will notice if the value erodes, right? And so they're at this point where they have most of the cultural cachet coming from the NFT space. It is sort of the thing that people know who are not in the NFT space, and they want to maintain that position. They want to grow that. They want to really solidify that as the thing, as the brand that people know, and that could slip away pretty quickly. I think there could be, you know, if they start to decline, and you know, maybe they're already there, but I really feel like somebody else could come up and grab that mantle. But over the next 6 months, they could also cement it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I do think this is a spot where, despite different opinions of strategy, where the handing over IP rights gives them some outs, because someone else can do something amazing with their apes that still allows the floor to stay. I'm loving the Punks comic project, and they just released issue 2 of that. It's cool. It's like a well done project that's using NFTs to create a story. I just think it's really cool. So yeah, I think that kind of stuff, if we see other people do meaningful things with apes, I think it's going to help out. But I think you also get the inverse of that, right? Where people get apes and do terrible things with them.
Maybe.
So who knows? Yeah.
Not yet, but maybe. All right. So I guess we had a few more things on the list, but we're running long. I think you should give the gift code update, just your impression of your most recent gift goat. Gift goat VeeFriends, part of the VeeFriends project. Gift goats are one of the special tokens with 555 of them. They supposedly get gifts twice a year or actually 6 times a year, I think, for 3 years. But what's the latest? Because you were just on
so
Zoom.
we got everyone, all the gift codes got a Creatures collab NFT recently, and with that we got a physical print.
What?
Creatures,
like you're talking about Danny Cole?
Yep, Danny Cole and Gary did a collab. So it's the creatures guys with the goat walks out. We got the NFT, and then we got a physical print signed by both of them.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a nice, and it's cool. I don't have it framed yet, so once it's framed, I'll show it off here. Yeah, that was awesome, and it was not. I think the floor on that is around 3 ETH, I think, almost. So, like, already in the first gift,
Oh my god.
if you minted your gift goat for 5, you're already pretty close to the.
Yeah, that's right.
So, but yeah,
and actually you could have done that at 5 when ETH was at like 2,500 at one point, or 2,700.
Yeah, because it dropped right after the launch,
Right.
right? And so then, so we had one Zoom call where he had told us the update that we'd be getting NFTs in place of, or in addition to, physical goods. So this first gift was the physical print and the NFT, which
Strong.
Yeah, it's good. I know there's another gift coming soon, so I'll give an update on that. I think it's clothing. They've said that, but they haven't said what. But occasionally, once before, we had a Zoom meeting that he sent out, and then his team sent out a Zoom meeting earlier this week. And it was more or less just quickly summarized. He basically just gave a big rant about holding gift goats. I'm not, and I'll also preface this, I hold lots of VeeFriends, and none of this is financial advice. But he was saying, if you sell this, I'm going to find you, and in 9 years, I'll run into you and I'll remind you of the mistake you made. He was just pumped up and fired up and doing the I know he loves the underdog thing, and he was just like, he was on fire. It was fun to watch. And I just love lots of people have strong opinions about Gary, but his passion and commitment to it, regardless of what you think of him, I think is really, it's fun to watch.
So I'm coming around to your view. When we talked about this a few weeks ago, you said you thought it was a plus that you're going to be getting NFTs as part of this program, as opposed to just physical goods. And I wasn't really sure if that would make sense because of the way it was originally sold. I know there are people who are hoping for a Tesla or something as one of the things, which I don't think was going to happen, but a car wouldn't have been out of the question. Someone might want to do a collab. The NFT element of it actually does a lot of interesting things. So first of all, if you received a car, there would be a taxable implication to that. So then that's not necessarily a easily liquid asset. So that, like, you could have a significant taxable event.
Sure. Yep.
NFTs, I think, as he sends them out, they could just be listed as 0. And then you only actually get the taxable event if you sell it.
Yep. Well, and we talked about it earlier, right? He's working, like, 3 of the projects we talked about in the beginning, he's involved in. So if he's giving away NFTs, like, no one has said this, but, like, it doesn't take much to connect the dots and be like, okay, well, if he's doing a project with so-and-so, it's possible that gift goats might get one of those NFTs as a gift or something.
Or even something beyond a gift. It might just be a perk.
Yeah. So at this stage, it's getting more compelling. My opinion, not financial advice, is that in the long run, I think VeeFriends are fantastic to own from a utility perspective, and also from just a value perspective. But I was already, because I had right place, right time, had minted a bunch. Like, it's hard to ignore, like, oh, maybe I should think about listing some of these. Right. The more he does this kind of stuff, the more I'm like, I'm not going to, maybe I'll hold on to the gift goat like this.
Well, you and I talked about it. You were thinking about, you told me that your assessment was Hangout Hawk was probably the most valuable because there's fewer of them. Yeah. And you got that direct connection with Gary. You had a pretty active group of Hangout Hawks. You guys were all interacting. Whereas Gift Goats was 555, was a bigger group. It wasn't really clear. But it strikes me both of those are going to be tremendously valuable.
Totally. Yeah. And I thought Gift Goat too was physical stuff. And I'm not some sort of enlightened Buddhist or something, but stuff is great, but I sort of have what I need. So Gift Goat, the value of the stuff never really struck me as being that compelling. But now that it's NFTs and they're starting to see some of the other stuff emerge, there is a community of 500 that you can communicate with. You do get to, he does other random gifts and things. So like it's the value I'm starting to see already is like, oh, the utility really is worth keeping it versus selling it for. I mean, I've made that I was, like I said, right place, right time. Like I could walk away from that and feel really good, but
Right.
at this point I'm holding it.
Yep. And the people who want to collaborate with Gary are the top people. This could be just a ridiculously profitable to hold. Really interesting to say, like, just sell this thing for $100,000 plus, maybe 150, depending on where the pricing is, versus being able to maybe just through the gifts that you get over the next several years, be able to net 2 or 3 times that. Really just an incredible opportunity. Plus, just to have some of those things, which, as you said, like the item that you had is just 3 ETH. Some of those things are going to be immediately out of the reach of people to actually acquire, or to acquire more than 2 or 3 of them.
Well, there's only 500 of these, right? 555, because that's all there are. So like you start getting into games and things, like who knows what sort of interesting things could happen. But there is something else that I think is important to point out, and that something I never thought I would really be affected by, but there's a sense of like, oh yeah, shit, man, I minted that and I'm still holding it. Like I
know.
And people see that and you get credibility for it. And it does tell the story of like, shit, I was here when that was happening. Like I believed in these projects when people were still saying, what the hell are you doing? It really makes you feel a part of the community in a way that I haven't experienced up to now with any other community, except IRL communities around like bands and music or something like that.
Right.
And I think that Gary's doing it right. So there is something about holding it. I don't know. When I just think about the coins and the value of stuff, it gets my thinking and my behavior doesn't really align with my value system, I don't think. So I have to try and balance that with.
Yeah. Well, I will say that, like, you bring up this good point. So I had 3 cores that I minted the week they came out. I wound up selling 2 of them, and in some ways you regret that because I sold them before the big pump, but all those come back from that sense. And so I did really well. It actually funded a lot of my other activity in the space. But I was really thinking when there was over 20 ETH for the core, I was like, well, I should drop that prudent polar bear, and just assuming that at some point it's going to retreat. Maybe I pick up a free 5 ETH or 10 ETH even, which is what it would have been. And I did think about this idea that I actually minted that polar bear, and if I get rid of it, then I'm just going to pick up something somebody else minted. And that's not as cool. It's not as clean on the blockchain. So that's a really good point. Okay, Scott, this has been great.
But there could be, there could be neat encounters with those people in the future. But yeah, I hear you, and I'll stop. I know we're way over.
Yeah. Well, so this was fun. Hopefully people will indulge us. Scott, what do you want to tell people to go to today? Scott Coin, Scott Leach, at Scott Leach on Twitter.
I think they should check out the Neftorian project. I think it's really cool. I think the art jam stuff is awesome. I participated in that project and was excited to contribute. I dig it. I'm really enjoying looking at the art and seeing some of the stuff people are doing, and I'm excited for the actual drop. But the mint passes are cool, so check those out.
Yeah, the mint passes are cool. The drop, I think, is going to be after the first of the year. We're sort of figuring out the best logistics. We're going to try to do it before Christmas, but I don't think that's going to happen. But these owls, by the way, for the PFPs are amazing. But the owls in the Founders Collection, the mint passes, but the Founders Collection is really what it is. 14 artists, including Scott. Really great. There's a few of them that are available on Rally. I just threw some up there so that people in the Rally ecosystem could have an easy access to them. I will send them an Ethereum version if they pick those up. But you can also get them on OpenSea. There's some available, all of them. There's some people who are thinking about collecting all 14, which not financial advice, but I might recommend. I certainly will hold all 14. I'm waiting right now. I'm not accumulating all of them because I'm letting the market sort of play out. But I think that would be great. Yeah, people should check out Neftorian.com and Neftorious.com. We talked about a lot of articles that we covered in Neftorious.com. I think we're doing good analysis. I think there's some, we're doing news. We're not doing all the news in the space. We're very selective. We're doing 1 or 2 stories a day. But we're, some of these bigger events, we're trying to do good analysis. So definitely check that out too.
Yeah, it just, if you're watching, like there's so many, everyone's asking about which projects to join. This is a project where you can actually get involved early in the process and sort of watch it grow. I think it's really cool. It's a good opportunity for folks, and it's legit. Like you see Brett Pretorius Rex on here talking to you, you know who he is. He's not, yeah, check it out.
Good. Yeah. Well, and there's a lot of people who I esteem more than myself who are involved with the project as well, which we'll be doing a lot of announcements over the next couple of weeks. All right, folks, I'm Creatorius Rex. Do follow me on the Twitter. So you'll be able to get all of the info there. And down below, you'll be able to see links to Niftorian projects, Niftorius, all the other things, and at Scott Leach on the Twitter. All you folks in NFT land, until next week, happy hunting.